Thank you very much, Mrs. De Souza, for this introduction, and I also would like to thank very much for the invitation to be here. It's really an honor and pleasure that I can participate in your first major conference. I was asked to talk about the challenges that the European Union faces in terms of economic governance. So I also prepared some presentation slides that you will see, and let me start. I always like to start my presentation with a chart. Hope I can move it in one way or another. If not, then can you please go to the next slide? So the first question that I asked is that if you look at just the main fiscal indicators of the Eurozone and the main fiscal indicators of the United States, then what you can see is that the Eurozone fares much better. On the left-hand side, you can see general public debt in the euro area as a whole, as a percent of GDP. And on the right-hand side, you can see the budget deficit. The blue is the Eurozone and the red is the United States. And what you can see here is that Eurozone has lower public debt as a whole than the US, and also the budget deficit is much better than that of the US. Here I used forecast up to 2013, so indeed in the coming years this much better situation is forecast to persist. So you can ask the question why it is the case that everybody talks about the collapse of the Eurozone and nobody talks about the collapse or the breakup of the United States of America, even though if you also see the politics in the US, also, I mean, the major parties, the Democrats and the Republicans are not really partners, and I mean, they agree on the very last minute on major issues like the debt ceiling, and yet nobody talks about the breakup of the US and the major crisis of the US. It may come at a point in time, but now the focus is on Europe. So let me now come to the next slide. It just shows what I would like to talk about today. The first issue that I would like to discuss is why we are in trouble, basically. The second issue is that what the European Union has done so far, and I try to assess. And the third issue, of course, is that what I think the European Union should do. The second was that there was a sole focus on fiscal issues. So there was a belief again that if the budget deficit is below 3%, then everything is fine and the Eurozone will operate nicely. Now the truth turned out to be that it was indeed a very false prescription and a very false policy assessment. And I list here two major reasons. One is that in some countries, like Ireland and Spain, there were clearly unsustainable bubbles, housing bubbles, credit bubbles, and so on. And there's also another group of countries, like I think Portugal also belonged to this category, that had accumulated very serious structural imbalances in terms of, let's say, high current account deficits, very weak competitiveness positions, and the inability to foster economic growth. The third issue is that there were no mechanisms to foster an adjustment, because Europe only mattered or cared about the fiscal issues. So let me come to the next slide, which compares Spain and the United Kingdom. If you look at the left-hand side and the middle panel, there you can see the gross public debt and the general budget deficit. And what you can see here is that Spain is better. Spain performed better than the UK. It had lower public debt than the UK and still has lower public debt. And also the budget deficit was much better before the crisis. Now it's broadly the same. Yet if you look at on the right-hand side, especially the end, which shows the 10-year government bond yield, then what you can see here is that the borrowing cost of Spain is increasing and increasing, while the borrowing cost of the United Kingdom is decreasing and decreasing. The European Central Bank started to purchase government securities of distressed countries, but always said this is temporary and only has the single goal of helping monetary transmission. So they do not say that the goal is somehow to overcome the Eurozone crisis, but only to help monetary transmission. I think the ECB has indeed a point of not going at the moment for a higher level of intervention or commitment, because clearly the current governance structure of the Eurozone is so fragile that, I mean, if the ECB just start buying bonds, that's not the solution to current problems. But at the end of the day, this may be needed. What was extremely beneficial, I think, is the European Central Bank support for the banks, because banks became indeed in a huge trouble, starting from the subprime and also from home-made vulnerabilities. So that was very useful. There are some new institutions which can also be useful, like the European Systemic Risk Board or the European Banking Authority. The only sad side is that they have very limited powers and mostly make opinions, but not strong rulings. And the stress tests, I think you also know quite well that they have been discredited the last year also, almost immediately now in the summer. They have also discredited. Now there's a new round. It seems that somehow we cannot really solve this issue. So this comes to an overall assessment. I listed 4 pre-crisis issues and 5 crisis issues. How many of these issues we have solved? And my answer is that we have solved 3 of the 4 pre-crisis issues. The SGP will be reinforced and may work better. There is an excessive imbalance procedure focusing on structural issues, very important. The European semester will also be as a means to force countries or to help countries do the adjustment. So these are the 3 issues that have been solved. What has not yet well been solved is the banking and the sovereign debt crisis management. So basically what we need to do is to solve the issues. So maybe I just go quickly to say, and then in the discussion we can discuss these issues later. So for the lender of last resort, the very simple answer is the European Central Bank. I put it there that I'm not in favor of money printing, but in some cases this may be necessary for survival. But if we can progress on the other points below, then I think it may not be needed. Money printing may not be needed, and the Eurozone could survive. Now, how to break the correlation of lethal correlation of banks and sovereigns? Most important would be, I think, is a move toward a kind of banking federation, whereby bank resolution would be centralized at the European level. But certainly we can centralize bank resolution only if supervision and regulation is also supervised. That would make a long way for making the Eurozone much more crisis-proof. Unfortunately, there is no movement toward this regard, toward this end. European leaders committed to national frameworks, more coordination, but still national frameworks. Eurobonds can help a lot. Again, it's a long issue, and I don't have much time to talk now. How to address the interdependence across countries? Again, a banking federation would help a lot. But it's very important for your country is how to break this downward spiral, which is happening. I think, again, we can look at the United States as an example, because in the United States also, the individual states have very tough budget rules. So, I mean, California has to be in a balanced budget. There's no choice. But there is a strong federal government that can invest in California and in any other distressed state. And we also need, I think, at the European Union level, a kind of centralized stabilizational risk-sharing instrument that can help those countries that are in trouble. Now, these countries are the Mediterranean countries, like Portugal, Spain, or Italy, but maybe 5 years from now, it will be Germany and the Netherlands. So it should not lead to a higher level of permanent redistribution, but I think such an instrument will be badly needed, because otherwise I do see really hope of coming out of the crisis. And certainly for the governance crisis, what we see is that simply the current governance framework does not really work, that we always have a summit in every second month, which is so to deliver the so-called comprehensive solution. And one day after the summit, the market is happy. 2 days after the summit, the market realizes that basically nothing serious has happened. They have just made some statements which are, I wouldn't say empty, but which are clearly not sufficient to solve the crisis. Unfortunately, this was the case in July. This was the case in October. I think that this is the case of the last week summit as well. And since I'm quite over time, let me stop here, and I would be very pleased to answer your questions in the answering questions section. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.